All right, let's go. Okay, so hey everyone, I'm Jarkko Laine from Finland. Go by the name Jarkko on the interwebs mostly, on Twitter, app.net. Not an IRC anymore because someone stole my nick. My home page is jline.net. We just founded a company called Bare Metal a few months ago to cover up. Oh, what the hell is that? Who put that slide in? Was it you, Matthias? Shit. Sorry, ignore that. Yeah, so I'm a co-founder at a company called Bare Metal. But since we're in Germany, I guess we should be called Bare Metal. However, the problem with that is that, are there any Swedes in here? Nice. So if you'd be a Swede, you would think about berries, because that's bear in Swedish. Well, of course, that doesn't fly in Germany, because in German, berry is bear, which is really German when you think about it. But I'm not here to talk about beer. That's on the agenda later tonight. However, I will get back to bears and Germans. For some reason, Germans and the Berliner especially seem to have some kind of affection with bears, and especially polar bears. Here's Knut, the famous polar bear. Rest in peace. The picture is from the Berlin Zoo, which is only a couple blocks away from here. However, the relationship between Germans and polar bears didn't used to be this close. Well, it was close in a way, but not as friendly. See, in I think 1930, near Stuttgart, an innkeeper decided to, or threw a big party to, I think, more than 100 people, and on the menu that day was polar bear meat, and not just any meat, but smoked polar bear ham. The problem with that was that this little fella had snuck into the meat. If you can't see the text, which you probably don't, it's called Trichinella larva, and it's not a very friendly guy. The result, trichinosis, about 100 people infected, of those 13 dead. And the reason I told you this today is that because of this story, I guarantee you the next time you're cooking polar bear ham, you will make it well done. Anyway, the agenda of this talk could be summarized as the duality of the mind, a farce in two acts. And since it's two acts of the same thing, we could call it the duality of the mind. Without further ado, Act 1. Brain pixels and the human RAM. And RAM in capital letters, as in not the animal this time, but the computer thingy. This here is an orienteering map of my home forest. We live a couple hundred meters away from there. Not going to talk much about it, although there is quite a nice hill there to do hill intervals by Finnish standards. The point about this map is an experiment made by a couple of psychologists called Daniel Simons and Daniel Levin. Sorry if I butchered the last name there. And the experiment went something like this. A trained actor approached a passerby on some sidewalk or a place where there were lots of pedestrians walking back and forth, and gave them a tourist map and asked them to help them find their way to some place. However, in the middle of the passerby watching the map and kind of having a close look at it, a couple of workmen carrying a door between the two of them walked between the two, so that they basically made kind of a smoke and mirrors trick. It only took a couple of seconds during which the passerby couldn't see the actor, and during that time they switched the two people. So after the door had passed by, the person asking for help wasn't the same person anymore. The funny thing is that almost none of the people they used in the experiment know this. So, oops. So they could change the person even to a person with different hair color, with totally different clothing, and in the end they swapped a man to a woman, and still more than half of the people didn't notice. So what does this tell us about our attention? Well, clearly it is very highly limited. And this comes down to two things. First, our focus of vision is very, very small. We have actually really good vision, like an average. During the last years, there's been a lot of talk about the retina display, so this is basically what it means. Kind of the human CMOS, or the sensor that we can say consists of brain pixels, which is of course not very accurate, but kind of a good metaphor. So they're very sharp in the middle, in the area called fovea. And so basically we can, the resolution is about 100 pixels or points in an area of about the point of a needle or pin of a needle when held at arm's length. But the thing is that this area is only about the size of a thumbnail on that same distance. And outside that, and especially at the edges, our vision is actually terrible. So to look for a metaphor here, it's about the same as having a tilt shift photo or iris blur, to be exact, I guess in this case, since it's not linear. And number two, our working memory is tiny. So not only is our vision very limited, also our working memory, where we store things that we see, is also very limited. So keeping with the computer metaphors here, our short-term working memory is a bit like RAM or cache. So when new stuff goes in, probably when it's full, which it is almost all the time, something has to give. So it's a bit like RAM or cache in a prehistorical computer. working memory can hold only 3 to 4 pieces of information simultaneously. Not 3 to 4 gigs or megs, kilobytes, or even bytes, 3 to 4 pieces of information, period. Okay, let's do something pretty or potentially interesting and hope that it even works. Okay, so I'm going to show you a short video. Pay close attention to what's going on in the video, and if you have seen this video, please don't ruin the fun for others. Okay, so basically, you're going to see a scene of a couple of people throwing basketballs to each other, and your goal is to calculate passes made by people wearing white shirts. Here we go. So how many got the number of passes correctly? Okay, keep your hands up. How many of you saw the gorilla? Nice. And of those who saw the gorilla, how many saw the curtain change color? Still a couple, and still keep your hands up who are still in the game. How many of you saw one person leave the game in the middle? Okay, still a couple. And how many of you who still have your hands up had not seen the video before? Okay, still a couple. Nice. Okay, let's do a quick rewind. Okay, so this was by one of the guys in the original, the map experiment, Daniel Levin, I think. Have to see. Yep. Okay, and an extra question: how many of those who saw all the things happening there that were just asked, how many of you also noticed that I threw off my hoodie during the video? Shit! Nice try, anyway. Okay, so I guess this hopefully made the point across that we can see very little, and of that little, we can keep even less in the memory. So what can we do about that? When you're designing any kinds of visualizations, basically 2 quick lessons. Minimize eye fixations, because whenever you have to switch your eye fixation from point A to point B, you probably forget most of what you just saw. So if you want to have some data to be compared with each other, if it's on different... Sorry, I think I have the video going on here. Let's kill it. And the second lesson, maximize data increase. This is a term coined by Edward Tufte, which means that you should get rid of all the craft that fights for the attention. So probably the best example of that is the kind of built-in graph templates in PowerPoint or even Keynote, all the 3D effects and the kind, because whatever does not contribute to the data or is not visualizing data but just there for the looks is totally unnecessary, and it makes it so much harder for anyone to actually understand what's going on there. Okay, so this was Act 1. Which is kind of the precursor to Act 2, thinking fast and slow. I'll start this with another story. In the magazine, which is one of the things Marco Arment has sold during the past year, Saul Himes, a pediatrician, wrote an article called "Give It Your Best Shot." And in this article, he tells about a 3-week-old girl who went deaf because of bacterial meningitis, which was passed to her by her unvaccinated brother. Of course, it was all preventable. There's been a vaccine against the bacteria in question, Haemophilus influenza type B, since 1984. So, after this case, Himes asked the mother of the girl whether she'd now give her children the benefit of modern medicine's vaccinations, to which the mother said no. So what's going on here? We can look at the question from the perspective of System 1 and 2, the kind of 2 minds that Daniel Kahneman, a Nobel laureate psychologist, coined in his book Thinking Fast and Slow. System 1 is kind of our mode of thinking that reacts to things. It's fast, it's intuitive, and it's automatic. And behind that, System 2 is conscious, it's rational, it's slow, laborious, and logical. However, it's also lazy and trusts System 1. And the problem with System 1 is that since it's so intuitive, it draws conclusions long before the conscious mind does. And what this leads to is that we're prone to many errors, whether we know it or not, different kinds of fallacies and biases. And let's have a look at a couple of them that probably are at play here. The first one is called availability bias, which means that we prefer wrong information to no information, in a nutshell. An example is that smoking can't be that bad for you. My grandfather smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day and lived to be more than 100 years old. Or a celebrity, in this case Jenny McCarthy, saying that her son got autism from vaccines. It must be true. Of course, the problem here is that the plural of anecdote is not data. So when we speak like this, we succumb to the availability bias. We create a picture of the world using the examples that most easily come to mind, which is, when you think about it, absurd, of course, because in reality, the things don't happen more frequently just because we can conceive of them more easily. That also leads us to pay much more attention to kind of big things like terrorist attacks rather than some boring illnesses that are actually much more likely to kill us in the end. The other one, called conjunction fallacy, which means that the more vividly something is presented, the more likely it is for us to believe it's true. So if you watch Oprah and see Jenny McCarthy tell about his autistic son and say that my science is Evan and he's at home, that's my science. What is the Western medicine to do there? So regardless that the single study that connected vaccines to autism has been disproven long ago, and the doctor who did that has actually lost his license, and Lancet finally published the retraction, and so on, the thing still refuses to die. And regardless that based on lots of evidence, her son, who supposedly was cured from autism in 2010 through diet and other means, his symptoms point actually to Landau-Kleffner syndrome, or even more prosaically, delayed development, not autism at all. And still people cry and clap their hands. To paraphrase George Lucas, so this is how science dies, to thunderous applause. In the court of public opinion, data and statements and science are no match for an emotional parent and her child. And last one, well, not last one, but last in this short introduction, story fallacy. We want our lives to form a pattern that can be easily followed. So what this means is that if facts don't match our narrative, we retrofit them. A good example of this is the Apple is doomed, just like with PCs in the 80s. It seems to be the kind of common narrative with many tech journalists that just try to fit all the news, all the facts into that same narrative. And of course, the same anti-vaccine narrative. The result, measles, once eliminated from the US, is on the rise again, and almost completely based in the anti-vaccine communities. I think only a few weeks ago there was another outbreak in Texas, and it's definitely not the first one. And that's something that we already had won. Of course, this is kind of a cheap shot. I mean, we're talking about wackos here, right? I mean, we're immune to this kind of biases, right? No pun intended, by the way. Let me tell you about one more fallacy called overconfidence effect, which means that we systematically overestimate our knowledge and our ability to predict. Funniest thing of all is that experts suffer at least as much as laymen. Well, maybe not more, but the problem is that they are just as bad at making predictions. However, they will offer their forecast with certitude. We're all biased. Let's just admit it. But hey, let's not be negative. The good thing about this, or the flip side of the coin, is that storytelling is a super powerful way to get your point across. Why? Here we have to look into the brain again. if you're listening to just a random, boring PowerPoint presentation with bullet points, a certain part in the brain gets activated. Scientists call this Broca's area or Wernicke's area. So basically it hits our language processing part in the brain where we decode words into meaning. And what happens then? Nothing. However, if you're telling a story, not only are these same language processing parts in our brain activated, but any other area in our brain that we would use when experiencing the effects of the story. So if you talk about food, our sensory cortex lights up. If it's about motion, our motor cortex gets active. So basically, with a good story, you can put your whole brain to work. And not only your brain, the whole brain of the listener. So by telling a story, the woman could plant ideas, thoughts, and emotions into the listener's brains. And this is not some voodoo, this is actually a brain research result. We're evolutionarily wired to listen to stories. How much do we have time? Okay. Okay, so quickly, things needed in a good story. You need a hero, a protagonist, a goal, an obstacle, which is also called a complication, which is kind of the flip side of the goal. A mentor, often the storyteller, and what's a story without a moral? You don't have to have all of these, but the more you have, the more compelling your story is going to be. Obviously, it's much harder to tell stories with data, but there are some ways. First of all, you want to create continuum, narrative. If you have a timeline, animate it, because it's way easier to see a story in data when it happens animated. Integrate information which is presented, create relevant emotions and affect, and basically help link to existing knowledge, because as you remember, it's much easier to get stuff from the working memory if you can link it to something in your long-time memory. And thus make your message more memorable and likely to impact behavior. And last rule, and the most important one. Anyone want to explain this one to me? Well, I can't explain it to you, so I'm just bad. So, rule number one, it has to make sense. The previous one was from the WTF Wiz.net. Go have a look at it if you want to. The word is full of visualizations that are just crazy. And if you don't believe me that you can tell stories with data, see Hans Rosling's TED Talks. That's about it. Two things to remember. First, our attention and memory are very, very limited. And keep that in mind when you design anything, not least visualizations. And two, storytelling is important, not because it's entertaining, but because it works. It makes people understand and remember things better. And the last and closing thought, if you're in the data visualizations, you're not in the data business. You're in a human communications business. Visualizations are just a tool to attain certain goals. Keep that in mind. Thanks.